Thank you. I wanted to introduce a few people that are here tonight. Maria Fuetues, who is on the board of the San Jose Evergreen Community College District. John Lebyba, who is our San Jose Planning Commissioner and candidate for District 3 Supervisorial seat. And Charlie Wasser, President of the Fairgrounds Board. Thank you. I want to keep this moving, but let me just introduce the panelists quickly to set context. We have Michael Brilliot, I hope I got your last name correct, who is the planner's planner, who is one of the deputy planning directors for general planning and I think urban design. We also have Jim Zito, who's a former chair of the Planning Commission, former chair, president pro tem of the Evergreen Community College Board. We have Alice Kaufman from the Committee for Green Foothills. We have Jerad Ferguson from the Mayor's Office, Land Use and Economic Development, and we have Shawn Milligan, who builds the homes that we all need to live in. Up first will be Michael Brilliot, and then we will have Jim and Alice and Jerad and Shawn, and then Jerad last. Here you go.
I'll do my best. So I'm going to assume you don't know a lot about the general plan and planning in San Jose. So let me just give you a little bit of basics. So we have a thing called the general plan. It is basically the blueprint of how a city will grow and change and provide services over time. The time frame of this general plan is through 2040. It has a vision of what the city, the community wants the city to become with the successful implementation of the general plan. And a whole policy framework is intended to get the city to achieve that vision. And the document really is a policy document that guides decision making, both from the planning director, the housing director, planning commission, all the way up to the city council. And we use it so whenever there's a decision or we make a recommendation, our recommendation is based on does the proposal, the project, whatever the services, does it further implement the general plan? Is it consistent with the general plan? So the Envision San Jose 2040 general plan, it plans to accommodate roughly about over 400,000 more people and aspires to accommodate 350,000 more jobs roughly. And it's and one of the primary strategies that it's doing that is really growing in what we call our growth areas. So if you look at the blue areas, those are our long-standing growth areas. They include, for more employment-based, North San Jose, Eden, the new and old Edenvale down here. And we have specific plans. This is a specific plan area. Then in 1991, Evergreen was a specific plan. It's actually been retired because it's built out. Oh, wow, pointer, thank you. And then of course we have downtown, which has been a growth area since I think 1776. And then so those are the long-term growth areas that we've had. What was new about this general plan is we had to figure out how to accommodate all these 400,000 new people and all these new jobs that we wanted in the city. And for the large part, San Jose is largely very well used and pretty much very much built out. So we have a growth boundary, we have established single-family neighborhoods, and where were you going to grow them? So the concept we came up with is urban growth boundaries, and there are 68 of them-ish spread out all over the city. And they are designed for more urban development that would include offices and retail and libraries and different types of housing, kind of building what we call a complete community where you can meet a lot of your daily needs in a small area. And I think one of the examples of an early urban village is right out the door, Evergreen Village Square. So that's an example of a more suburban urban village, but it really, I think, kind of is an example of what an urban village could look like. And they're all over the city, and there's three horizons for them. So narrowing it down to, this is actually, the blue line is the Evergreen Area Development Policy, which consists of Council District 8, part of Council District 5, and part of Council District 7. But within this area, there are a number of urban villages. Evergreen Town Square is one of them, although it's largely built out. But you have, for example, Aborn and San Felipe, Silver Creek and Capitol, Tully and King, Arcadia, Eastridge. These are the urban villages that are in this area. Now I want to note that this general plan plans for 120,000 housing units. And within this blue area in the general plan, there's only about, I think it was 2,300 housing units planned. So this area of San Jose, Evergreen, District 8 is not an area that's really planned for significant growth. I will note in the area development policy, which is in blue, that was a policy that dates back to 1976, recognizing the challenges of getting cars in and out of the area. There's actually a lot of flooding issues that was dealt with too. That it was a policy about when and how development could happen and identify transportation improvements. The area development policy it's been modified many times over the years, but it still is in existence to this day. And in that area development policy, there's only 138 housing units left that could be built in that whole blue area. And I have to look at my notes, I can't remember off the top of my head. There's just over 70,000 square feet of office, retail, commercial type uses that's available. And actually, there's a number of pending commercial projects and office projects, and if all of that stuff got built, we'd actually be 25,000 square feet oversubscribed. So there's a bit of competition for the remaining capacity that's left. There's what's called the general plan land use map of this area. The area development policy, again, most of District 8, actually I think all of District 8 of the hillsides. And yellow is essentially single family, so it also reflects really the existing uses in this area. So it's largely a single family area. And just something I want to make note is people often will ask us, what is the zoning of my property, or I want to redevelop it. And that's an important question to ask, but the real question you need to know is what is the general plan designation of my property? General plan dictates what you can do with your property if you want to redevelop it or it's vacant and you want to develop it. And so it's actually more important than zoning. Zoning is almost not that important because you can always change the zoning to consistent with the general plan. So that's kind of the area in a nutshell. I want to note something else though, and that is that there's been a big shift that has occurred statewide. There was a bill, SB 743. So this is getting a little planning wonky, but there's a thing called level of service that has been used for years to measure traffic congestion, usually at intersections, but it can be used in roadway segments or portions of the roadway. And it was used in environmental impact reports and environmental analysis to identify if there's new development or plans for new development, what are the traffic impacts that could occur in an area. And it's measured from A to F, and F is failure. You can't get through the light, you have to wait a cycle or two. And A is probably, A-born at a Sunday morning, there's not a lot of cars. So that's the kind of metric that's been used historically, but the state said we can no longer use that metric anymore. In part because traffic congestion is not an environmental impact. And actually, the level of service actually often creates environmental impacts by widening roadways and adding to capacity. You're actually creating more environmental impacts. So we've been told, directed by the state, and the city has shifted to a vehicle miles traveled metric. And what we're measuring is how much driving does a project induce? Does it induce a lot of people to drive a lot? Long distances, or does it discourage driving because of the design of the project, because it's located on transit, and other measures and other aspects of the project? So I thought you might be interested that in the area development policy, Council District 8, what you're looking at is red is extremely high vehicle miles traveled. Green is low and good, and then there's sort of a gradient in between green and red. So this is for jobs, just generally jobs, not job specific, but for employment. And then if you look at this map here, this is for essentially housing units, people, residents. So it's also very, very red. I think the point of this is that this VMT policy recognizes, even though it's relatively new, it recognizes what the area development policy that goes back to 1976 was saying that this is an area where people drive a lot, and if you bring more people in, it will result in a lot more cars driving long distances in a lot of places. And so kind of wrapping this up, given that this is generally not an area that's planned for significant new development in San Jose. Most of the development is focused in North San Jose, focused in downtown, focused in those urban villages that are on places that have significant transit. I think one sort of question mark that's out there is the Reed Hillview Airport, and of course, like tonight at ETA is talking about the light rail extension. So the light rail extension would likely change this map significantly. And then there's a question of the future of Reed Hillview Airport that's on the table. So that's kind of a question that will be discussed in the coming years. But with that, I think we're gonna have questions later. I think I'll wrap up and turn over the mic to
So I'm Tim Zito. I've been a longtime resident of Evergreen. Got no slideshow. I'll just give you a little history. Back when Dave Cortese first took office as council member, he put together a group that did a study on the East Hills Visioning Project. And what that was when a bunch of developers came to the city and said, we want to develop the areas that are still developable in Evergreen. And even just right outside of Evergreen. And Dave said, well, you know what we should do is we should basically master plan this in a way. So he put together a committee and asked community members to join it. And they considered 4 sites because there was a significant development that was going to be proposed on the 4 sites. One was the college site. The other was Pleasant Hill Golf Course. The other was the Arcadia site, which is the one that's being developed right now across from East Ridge. And the 4th property was the Berg property, the one that was subject of that ballot measure last June. Okay. So those 4 sites were being proposed for over 7,000 units. It was kind of a follow-on to the Evergreen specific plan, which was put together back in the early 90s when Pat Zito was our council member. So it goes back a ways. Part of it was the Evergreen development policy as far as how much traffic and how much impact can all of this development have. And as Michael said, and he probably knows way better than me, how many iterations that's gone through, and quite a few, I'm sure. But still, the whole purpose was to make sure that we had a livable area. There's a strong recognition that we have some very limited arterials to get to and from the freeways, either 280 or 101. Capital Expressway was supposed to have a light rail for a long time. We've been paying for it for a long time, waiting to see it. But the question is that still viable, given things that have transpired since then? One was during that Evergreen Visioning Project, they brought the number down from 7,500 down to about 5,000 units, something like that, with significant amenities given to the community for upgrades to Capital Expressway, to the 2 interstate exchanges, which have been done since then. Capital Expressway has been improved since then, and significant contributions to the school districts, both high school and elementary school district, which, minor correction, I'm on the Evergreen Elementary School Board. Since then, I had sat on the Planning Commission for 8 years. I was very happy to do so and had the honor to do that. And one of the things that came to the Planning Commission at that time was to the consideration of the environmental impact of the final plan that was considered for the 4 sites. Okay. At that time, if I tell you 2008, I think you might have a vision in your head of what might have happened at that time, and everything was basically tabled. Part of it, at the time, if I'm not mistaken, Coyote Valley was also being considered right around that time as well, and that was tabled. So nothing was done. Since then, developers have come back to the city on the Berg site, on the other sites. Arcadia finally went forward and said, we'll just take what's already been allocated to us, the 200 units or whatever it is, and we'll build that. Okay. Nothing's come forward that I'm aware of on the Pleasant Hill site, and now you see what's being proposed on the college site. Okay. At one point, the college site was being considered for 600, very low income servicing housing. Teachers, fire, police, all entry level at one time. But what was never cleared up then was what is the environmental impact and whether or not that would have really been able to be built as it was. But it was a proposal. Unfortunately, everything got tabled, and we're in the situation we're in here today. My purpose on this panel is just to provide some historical perspective and maybe give you some impact, some information on things that might have happened at some time or another.
Okay, hi, my name is Alice Kaufman, and I am the Legislative Advocacy Director with Committee for Great Foothills. And we're a nonprofit organization that works to protect open space and natural resources in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. We only work in these two counties, we're very local, and we work on land use and natural resource issues. And some of you probably have heard me before. I came here and I spoke to the D8 roundtable a little over a year ago when the ballot measure, the Evergreen Senior Homes measure, later on called Measure B, was going to be on the ballot. And so we obviously worked very hard on that, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later on in my talk. So I was asked to come here tonight to talk about the environmental interest in planning and land use, and basically why transit-oriented infill development is an environmental issue. People say that a lot, it's not always explained exactly what the connection is. So first of all, preserving open space gives us a lot of benefits. Wildlife habitat, protection against flooding, preserving open space filters pollutants out of the air and the groundwater. We get agricultural land, which provides locally sourced food. A lot of people talk about the importance of buying local food. You can't have local food if you don't have local farmland, so that's an important issue. And also just for hiking and enjoying the outdoors, and just for the natural beauty. Even if you never do actually go out onto a trail and hike, being able to look up on the hills and see nature there rather than development is important to a lot of people for quality of life. As you can see here, on the left we have a photo of Daly City. They built over basically all of their hillsides. Pretty much everything in Daly City is developed unless it's an actual park. And then on the other side we have a hillside in Coyote Valley, so you can see the difference there. When we build up on the hillsides, we not only deprive ourselves of these views of nature, but we're also creating development patterns that are bad for the environment and for our own quality of life. And some of the previous speakers talked a little bit about this. That when we do our land use planning, we need to think about the choices that we make. We are making decisions about how our cities should grow. And we can look at the open space and the fields and the hillsides that are on the edges of our cities and say, oh look, there's nothing really important there. Why don't we just go ahead and put some houses or some offices or some industrial buildings there? We can do that, or we can make a decision instead to build in infill areas. And this has a double benefit. Because first, obviously, it preserves the open space, you're not building there. And second, it also means, as Michael was saying, people don't have to travel so far to get from home to work or to school or other destinations. And if you can build transit-oriented development, then you're also getting people out of their cars. So this takes care of cars off the roads, that's better for the environment, also just better for the commute times for everybody who still needs to drive. And it's also more affordable for low-income families who might not own a car, or there might only be one car for the household. And this is, some of you may remember seeing these lawn signs around last year. We had our fight against Measure B and in favor of Measure C, and all of the environmental groups in the area came in on this fight, and we really sort of like started out the campaign and spearheaded the campaign. And the reason for that was because Measure B, the Evergreen Senior Homes Initiative, I know that everybody here was very aware of what it would do to that parcel of land, the Carl Burke parcel at Evergreen, but also it would have impacted the entire city. It would have facilitated residential sprawl in a whole lot of areas, including in Coyote Valley. And then Measure C, which was brought on essentially to combat Measure B, was an anti-sprawl measure that would have limited the ability of residential sprawl on certain lands that were within a mile of the Green Line. So that was a big issue that we worked on, and Coyote Valley, as you heard a few times tonight, is another issue that a lot of us are paying attention to right now. If you're not familiar with where Coyote Valley is, it's basically sort of in between the southern tip of the urban part of San Jose and Morgan Hill. And it was first designated for development back in the 1980s. That was long before we understood the benefits that open space brings us. But in spite of the fact that it's been designated for industrial development ever since then, it's still, almost all of it is still open space. And so this is the view from the County Valley Open Space Preserve. You're sort of like looking north, mainly northeast over County Valley. And although the general plan still does designate North County Valley for industrial development, what we've noticed since we came out of the recession is there is just not very much interest on the part of developers to build there. You know, when Google decided to build in San Jose, they didn't go to Coyote Valley, they wanted Jerad. And we're seeing a real boom in new office construction downtown, but nobody seems to want to build office towers in Coyote Valley. And that's basically because their workers don't want to be out in Coyote Valley. They want to be in infill areas. They want to be able to take transit to work. They want to be able to walk to restaurants. This old model of the sprawling tech campus where you drive in and park in a sea of parking. And when you drive a couple of miles, to go to lunch is not what's being built these days. So environmental groups now are working to purchase for conservation as much land in Coyote Valley as possible in order to permanently protect it from development. And the City of San Jose is a partner in this effort since with the passage of Measure T, which was on the ballot in November, that included $50 million for flooded groundwater protection in Coyote Valley for land acquisition for those purposes. So the city is in part of these negotiations with landowners there to try to preserve some of the land. And we're hopeful that this will go a long way towards permanent protection of much of Coyote Valley. But there still will be parcels in Coyote Valley that are at risk of development unless we change the general plan to make land conservation in Coyote Valley easier. And the city is going to be initiating the 4-year review of the general plan over the next 12 to 18 months. And so we're hoping that this review will include basically the opportunity to take a new look at the general plan's vision for Coyote Valley in light of how much things have changed since the 1980s. And the fact that we now understand how important protecting open space is, we now have the vehicle miles traveled standard, which really discourages developing out on the edges of cities and open space. And we just know so much more about why it's more important to build infill and that we shouldn't sprawl. So I'll just leave you with this thought: if we protect nature, it will protect us. And we've seen that time and again, so we hope that we can still protect nature in Coyote Valley. Thanks.
My mom was one of the first graduating classes at Del Mar High School, I think in 1961. She actually transferred from Campbell High School to when Del Mar opened. So our family's been here for a long time. KT Urban has been in the development business since 1988. It was founded by Ken Tersini. We're located in Cupertino. About 15 years ago, we made a conscious decision to focus our development efforts in downtown San Jose. I don't know how many of you folks get down there from here since traffic is a little rough, but our first project was the Advocacy building behind the Dianza Hotel. It's a 329 unit high-rise condo building. Unfortunately, our timing was impeccable. We went to sale in about December of 2008. So we were pioneers and we took a lot of arrows in the back on that one, but we didn't give up. Since then, we've developed about 3,000 residential units in downtown San Jose. We have a pipeline of probably an additional 600 units. We helped, with Jared's help and Michael's help, write the co-living ordinance in the city of San Jose. For those of you who don't know, co-living is it's a new model of housing that's basically for folks who can't afford to live in a studio apartment. These folks have all kinds of common amenities, and then the bedrooms are much smaller, so they're able to offer the units for about 20 to 30% less than the studio apartment. So we think it's going to be hugely successful, especially for young people like this young gentleman here who want to stay here in Silicon Valley. I'll agree with Michael on development opportunities in San Jose. They're really limited to, at least for residential, for downtown and urban villages. Urban villages are kind of still emerging. A lot of people haven't quite figured out how you make them work. I think they work in select areas in and around Santana Row. We have a small project there on Olin Drive. I don't know if you guys know where the theaters are there, but it's next to the theaters. So we're working through that. There's some challenges that we're hoping that we can get through. I think we're close, Michael, so.
If not, talk to Jerad.
You know, one of the things that we all need to do, if you don't want to see development in Evergreen, and I don't think there's much political will to do much in Evergreen these days with the mayor, and I won't speak for Sam, but we need your help in promoting infill development. It's really expensive to build high-rise product today. We've seen construction costs go up probably 1% a month for the last 3 years. One of our projects, One South Market, was a 312 unit project. It cost about $120 million to build that project. That same project today will probably cost between $165 and $175 million. So it's really difficult. One of the reasons why we don't see more projects coming in downtown is because of the cost. We're working with the mayor's office and city staff to try and help some of these projects get out of the ground by taking a different look at how fees get charged for residential buildings. A lot of times fees get charged on a per unit basis. And so when it's charged on a per unit basis, it actually discriminates or penalizes smaller units. So for example, say I wanted to build an 850 square foot apartment, and the affordable housing fee was $25,000 for that, right? Well, I'm incentivized as a developer to build a much larger unit because that fee actually costs me less. So we're working with the city on trying to look at different ways of calculating fees to help promote our efforts in downtown. Downtown San Jose has seen some amazing traction. We are all holding our breath to see when some of these projects are going to come out of the ground. I think there's 20 million square feet roughly of new office development in the downtown area. Google's about 8 million of that. That translates to about the need for about 80,000 new housing units in San Jose, in downtown San Jose. There are a number of projects that are approved that are waiting to get built. And so my hope is that we can work with community groups and environmental groups, not only locally, because there's only so much that the city can do, but at the state level too, to reform things like CEQA. I've done greenfield development in my career, different places in California. Greenfield development should be held to a different standard than a project like we're building in downtown San Jose. Because what happens is there's special interest groups, I won't mention any names, but who use CEQA to basically to challenge and extort our projects. And so it gets really expensive and it gets really time consuming. So if you guys want to encourage infill development, I encourage you to reach out to Ash Kalra and hopefully he'll respond to you in a timely manner. But talk to them about reforming CEQA. It's the California Environmental Quality Act. It was actually passed by Ronald Reagan, I think, in 1976.
72.
72? Basically is a process for approving development. There's a number of different categories that you have to review: biological issues, aesthetic issues, traffic, noise. Michael could go through them better than I can, but
The common term is people think of environmental impact report. That's part of
right.
CEQA.
And so, you know, it's our position that if we're building an infill area, urban infill area, where you're not impacting the flora and fauna like a development in Coyote Valley or Evergreen, that we should be exempt from that. I mean, there's certain things that we need to look at, like traffic and certain things, but it shouldn't take us 26 months to get a high-rise tower approved in downtown San Jose, like it is today. So that's all I have to say tonight. I'll give it to Jerad, and you guys can pepper me with questions later if you want.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Jerad Ferguson with the Mayor's Office, work in his Office of Economic Development, and we're a small but mighty team of 3 folks. And we, our primary task is obviously advising the mayor, but we work on business retention, recruitment, and economic development side. And obviously, a big part of what we do is work in land use. So Michael talked a little bit about our general plan. Obviously, a big focus of the mayor right now is housing and housing affordability and availability. And so getting new housing is really important. I was asked to talk a little bit about the emerging state role in that. I can't speak too much to that being from the city, but I just wanted to share with you kind of the more global perspective, just some numbers that I pulled up for this. So from a statewide perspective, this is from a report from last February in the state. So they estimate 1.8 million new homes are needed in California by 2025. Right now, on average, the state's producing 80,000 homes a year. To meet that 1.8 million, we need to be producing 180 homes per year. So that kind of gives you, so that's kind of the overall perspective. And so you've seen a lot of, bills in the state that are, trying to look to address that, and also kind of play a role in what the cities traditionally haven't played a role in terms of land use. And so obviously from a city perspective, we would prefer to maintain our local control. And, our goals on housing and through our general plan to focus development and build units in urban villages is important and continues to be important. But that just kind of gives you some perspective from kind of why there's been a lot of these housing bills on the state level. So kind of going back to the city, we're coming up on our second 4-year review, as Alice mentioned, and that's really a opportunity for us to look at how we are performing in our general plan that was adopted in 2011, how our urban villages are performing, how housing is being produced, and how we're doing there. So there's a lot of things we're going to look at there, and kind of just for the process for that. The scope of that 4-year review will be going to the City Council next Tuesday. And a part of that process is reconvening the task force, which is a 43-member group that is composed of residents. Jim was actually a member of the task force. And they will weigh in a number of aspects of the general plan, including the North Coyote Valley. So just some other things to mention quickly, and then I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions. Just some of the other things the mayor's working on and the city's working on. We've really been interested in seeing more accessory dwelling units built. These are the in-law units, granny units. Last summer, the city, we passed a lot of new rules that would allow more flexibility in seeing those units built in terms of lot sizes, and making that easier to do. And just some numbers on that. So far this year, we've had 104 permits for ADUs, and that's a very large increase. Just from 2018, we had 190 for the whole year. So just until now, we've had 104 applications. So that's something we're working on in terms of housing and more housing. So I think I'll leave it at that, and then if there's, happy to answer lots of questions, and I'll leave my card too, just, overall, if there's ever anything that, we in the mayor's office can help you with, or questions we can answer, very happy to do that. Got my phone number and email on my card, so.
We have a half hour approximately for questions. Go ahead, sir.
David, tracking.
I'm a resident of San Jose for the last about 25 years. In the last 2 years, I believe, please correct me, mayor, vice mayor, or the 10 council members, 2 or 3 city council members, they have visited Holland and Denmark for studying the bike routes. So why those reports are not available? If it could be available to us, it will help us what is going on in Denmark, in Holland. So Denmark, Holland is a country. The Evergreen Valley is a very small place. So we should study those country development and try to build the right things in San Jose City or in Evergreen Valley. We should have the reports on hand, the San Jose residents. All the 10
Are
council
the
districts.
reports delivered after visits such as that? I think is what he's asking.
If the council member and the mayor take overseas visits, all the reports should be passed on to all the 10 districts.
Yeah, so I didn't go to Copenhagen, I sure wish I did, but all my friends did, and we've gone there for 5 years. I don't know if there's actually a report that's done. There is a presentation that I saw, which I'm sure that they could come present it to this group. The people that have gone are advocates and nonprofits. There are folks from the city, the ETA, elected officials. And so so it's actually had a big impact on the leadership of the city. And as a result of that, there's been a lot of bike and pedestrian projects that are being built right now. They're being built more as pilot, and eventually they will be built with concrete and made more permanent. They're focusing right now generally what I would call central San Jose, which is that pre-1950 or pre-World War II part of San Jose. And then eventually they're starting to expand it out. If you go in the downtown, you'll see a lot of kind of Denmark, Copenhagen-ish type of improvements being put in. So that stuff is moving forward. I mean, one of the goals of the city is to become essentially the biking paradise of California.
Just one thing to add too, just in terms of the report back to council, there's a standing item on every council meeting where council members report on their travel, and so they give usually a verbal report to the rest of the council in terms of the trips that they've taken and what they've learned and everything else. So that does happen in terms of sharing of information.
Yes, so my question was, in Evergreen Valley and Silicon Valley, we have the best scientists, technologists, who everybody cannot travel to Holland, Denmark. So if these written reports are available to the citizens of San Jose, we could give our feedback on those reports, and we can develop the best. If a country can develop those things, Evergreen Valley is a very small island compared to Denmark or Holland or the other countries. So decision can be very fast in the city.
Yeah, I mean, we'll pass that feedback to the people. Again, there may actually be a report, I'm not actually sure, but we'll give that feedback back to the people who are involved. It's actually was paid for by the Knight Foundation. They may be doing a report, and then we could make sure it's put on the website so it's accessible to people that want to use it or just read it.
Someone right here have a question? Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah, let me borrow the microphone. I'm not sure everybody can hear here at the back. This concerns the college development land at Evergreen College, the 27 acres. In 2016, the college was required that the entire 27 acres be changed to commercial use so that they could master plan the 27 acres. They told the city council, this is the college, and community that there would be no housing. But in 2016, the city council required that there be a master planning process for 27 acres, significant community engagement, and that the developer would incur these costs. It doesn't seem like that's likely gonna happen. Republic, your urban did not follow through with the required community engagement, did not bring a draft plan back to the community before filing the PD zoning application in March 2019. So who will really pay in terms of the development regarding Evergreen College and possibly housing there? So that's my question.
Would anyone like to offer some ideas?
Can you repeat the last sentence there?
Yeah.
What was the question?
Yeah, so is all of the costs which could be put down on the college be paid for by the developer? Will housing be allowed there? And it seems like there's a lot of loose ends, and it seems like there's $3 to $4 million that is floating on the table, and it's likely the developer's gonna get it rather than the college.
I can answer it from the perspective of being a school board trustee. The school boards make decisions on their properties and they approve contracts. So whatever's in the contracts has to be approved by their school board. We have a school board member from the college district here, and maybe she could contribute a little bit to that answer. It really is up to the school district to enforce their contracts, to negotiate a good one and to enforce it. As far as the use of the land, there are significant ed code that dictates what you can do with land and how you need to go about surplusing it if that's what you're doing. And so far, all the challenges to that have basically come back saying, yeah, they pretty much follow the rules, right? And now, as far as the general plan and master planning the whole 27 acres, that is what I know the District 8 Roundtable Land Use Committee is working with the college on to make sure that the community has significant impact and we have a charrette, much like we did with the 4 opportunity sites for the Evergreen Hills Visioning Project. So we're still pushing on that. I think the community needs to make its desires known in that regard. And as far as the monies are concerned, it's all about the contract. That's my input on it. Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, housing is not allowed, the general plan does not support housing on that site, and the current area development policy doesn't support housing on that site.
You said we had how many allocations left?
I think we have 138 units left, and that's all the way up to Story Road, 101, Hellier, up to the East Hills. So no, housing is not allowed now. I mean, who knows what could happen in the future, who knows, but yeah, I don't anticipate it
That's
would
good to
be.
hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good to hear.
Jerry?
Go ahead, Sherry.
No, I mean, yes.
Well, let me just say one thing. One of the things that we were very concerned about with any developments, whether it's on the college site or any other sites, Arcadia came forward with basically saying, we'll just take what was already granted to us and grandfather it in. So that's why they're able to build the houses that they're building over there. And those allocations were already approved, if I'm not mistaken, right? We are very concerned about any large development that's going to basically pop the lid on the Evergreen development policy, because if it gets to a certain point, there's gonna be no choice to go back and revisit that whole policy, if you will. And how that policy gets rearranged, if it does, it's gonna have a huge impact on us as a community. So we're trying to keep you as much informed as possible, and we appreciate the outcome that we see today with all you guys coming out here.
Thank you.
Sherry?
Okay, so real quick on what he was talking about. Those whole, so first of all, a little background. I sat on the Evergreen Vision Project with Jim for quite some time, talking about the properties. Rose Herrera said to me the other day that their property was already zoned for some units. Can you confirm or deny that? Has that Evergreen property already been zoned for units? And I'm not talking about in a recent year or two. I'm talking about.
You mean Evergreen College?
Yeah.
No, I've not heard that, no.
And she told me for sure different. Anyway, but my question is, you know how we've done the cap on housing here at Evergreen? And yet, gentleman number 2 I want to say,
Michael.
that's sort of true. And then about, well, I thought you said 2,600 units coming in?
No, there's not 26. So,
2,300.
yeah, so there's two different things. There's the general plan capacity, which plans for development over, well now it's 2040, so how many years is that? 20 some years? Yeah, it seems farther away than that, but I guess it's only 20 years away. And that's sort of the longer term capacity, and it plans for those in urban villages, so it's limited like 5 locations that you could do it. That's the long term plan, but those areas that are planned for that growth sometime in the future, not now, those are the Horizon 3 urban villages generally. So right now, the policy that dictates what you can do now is the area development policy, which has been around, and I think there's 5 different versions of it. It started in 1976, and the most recent one was 2008, which my wife was the project manager on that. Yeah, so there's 139 units left in that policy.
So do we need to somehow advocate for our community to stick to the existing cap so that that other 2,300 units doesn't get built by 2040, or?
Well, I mean, that's your prerogative to do that. I mean, that's not what the plan is currently. Yeah. And I just want to say, I mean, yes, it's 2,300 units, but in the scheme of things, that's almost no growth. If you look at 120,000 housing units planned in San Jose.
Big red spot on our area though.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we do have to grapple with is that there are opportunities to land to build more commercial. We're not talking about big office buildings, we're talking about, small offices, retail that serves existing residents. And we're at a point now where a developer, even a small property owner, couldn't build anything because they're out of commercial capacity. The issue with this area is not employment, commercial, the issue is housing. So, in the morning, this is a bedroom, everybody leaves the bedroom and goes west, north. And in the afternoon, as you all know, they come back in. And so actually by putting an employment area actually works pretty well. It's a reverse commute. And it also just provides services and stuff for people who live in this community. So it's not really so much an issue of commercial per se. And that's one of the challenges with the area development policy we have now is we are actually, if everything goes forward that's currently moving through the process, we're oversubscribed. And there's going to be a competition to Oklahoma Land Rush to who gets those permits first. So that's kind of a challenge we have to sort of figure out.
I have a question. In the scoping that's being done for the 4-year development task force work plan, is there any contemplation of discussing the Evergreen development policy?
So there's discussions about that. I will say stay tuned for Tuesday. So the staff memo already went out. We're anticipating other memos will come out from the mayor perhaps and other council members that will sort of outline what the scope will be. They could be released anytime between now and Tuesday morning. So Tuesday, that's the day when all the things are brought to the table. The mayor and the council work through and a motion gets passed on what is the actual scope of work that the task force will address. So it's kind of, I would say it's discussions are occurring, but stay tuned.
So what I was thinking is since most of the growth in San Jose residential growth is going to be outside of the Evergreen area, is the Evergreen development policy going to be changed by advanced planning and a conscious decision, or is it going to be one development that tries to push through and change it without the benefit of master planning?
No, so any work in Evergreen will be initiated at the direction of council and with staff doing the work, not because of a development proposal. And I think, and that's why I put the VMT maps up there, the vehicle miles traveled. Again, I want to emphasize any discussion about the future of the Evergreen ADP is really under the sort of outcome that this is not an area appropriate for significant new development, particularly housing development. As we're looking at the general plan and the city, it's becoming more and more clear, yes, we need to build a lot more housing, as Jerad and Shawn said, a lot more housing, but the right places to do it are in more urban locations, on transit, closer to where the places of employment are. And that's going to continue to be the focus of any kind of changes to the general plan.
Can I just add something to that? So I'll put my developer hat on for you all. So it's pretty clear. I haven't spent much time in Evergreen since I was an apprentice carpenter on a project at Ruby and Aborn in 1990. But it's one thing to say that you guys don't want housing in your neighborhood, but I'd really encourage you to contact your council member and tell them that you support housing in areas like downtown and the urban villages, okay? One of the big issues that's coming up is the cost of development, and there's a fee reduction program for downtown development. I'm not sure that your council member supports that, but if you really want to do what's right for the city of San Jose and you want to focus growth in downtown and not have pressure on your neighborhoods, I'd really encourage you to reach out to your council member and have her support those fee reductions that are coming up here in June. So that's a really important issue for urban development in San Jose.
I just wanted to add to what Michael said. We're kind of right in the middle of things being discussed and considered. So I'm happy to, as the council initiated items come forward, happy to share with you and everyone, and happy to come back for any further discussions as things come up, if questions come up.
So let me just add one other piece to this. And as Jerad mentioned earlier, I was honored to be on the 2040 original and then the update a few years later. And one thing that I did notice though is that Evergreen, I just confirmed with Michael, Evergreen does have a couple or two or three urban villages planned currently within Evergreen. And if they were to come to fruition, then yes, the EDP would have to be reconsidered and redeveloped, if you will. So one of the things that would be considered at the next update is what happens with these urban villages, right? And are the ones that are designated or tentatively designated still viable or feasible? Does it make sense? The one thing that I'm keeping my eye on very closely is Reed Hillview, because that, if I understand correctly, the county is looking to convert that. And if that's converted, I don't know if you've noticed over by the Great Mall, where the light rail is there, if you notice the
Smart station.
right, there'll also be, right, but the significant high density housing that's built right up next to the light rail, that's right there, right? If light rail comes down Capitol Expressway as being proposed, is that one of the kind of the synergistic relationships that'll be there? We have the light rail, we have Capitol Expressway, and we have a real big open spot at Reed Hillview. Could that be high density development? Could that be commercial? Could that be whatever, right? So it's the next update to the general plan is pretty significant as far as its impact on what Evergreen's going to, how it's going to come out.
Yeah, I'll answer that.
Okay. Yeah. Just one thing to add. As we were looking, as Michael was showing that VMT map, and the boundary of the policy area, there are some green areas of that, and until the policy is revisited, there's no way to really do any development in there, and so, but with that VMT policy, that area of red would make any development in that red area very difficult, even without the policy. So just.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, my question is regarding the consideration of water in all this planning. I see folks, we need more buildings, now let's people need street Googling because we need more jobs, because we need more people. But somehow, the water is kind of an interesting thing. So I talked to some of the water board members and asked them questions, and I gotta say, I'm not sure I got it right, but what happened is I asked them, can the city plan to build and have no regard to whether there's even water available? And they said yes. So I was like, do you folks believe that we should actually consider whether there's enough water resources available to actually be able to do all this building?
So I can kind of answer that. So Shawn alluded to CEQA, and part of the environmental review is looking at water supply assessment. So we do look at water supply in the development process. So.
Ron, do you have a question?
Yes. So, on your long-term care, there's a new project which is being developed on a 2-acre lot. It's in a busy intersection, it's a two-lane street, it's on Ruby and Narrow. And it's a religious place which is being built for about 500 people capacity, less than maybe 1.5 acre lot. So we think, at least we being in that vicinity, we think it's definitely going to impact the capital and the quality of life for the people there. So wanting to understand what kind of ground rules are in place so that way these kind of large projects don't come in a completely residential area like where we live.
So I think that, sorry, I don't know if I caught it all. Is that the proposal for the temple?
That's right.
Yeah. I actually got an email about this from a community member, so I know a little bit about it. So it's in a residentially zoned area. So the use is allowed, but does require a conditional use permit, which we will look at all the kind of the things that you mentioned in terms of the access with the intersection there, the parking. All of those sorts of things, and then a conditional use permit has to be approved by the planning commission and is appealable to the city council. So, and I don't think that they've submitted an application yet, but happy to stay in contact with you when they do and to
On that particular development, they've filed a pre-application, and it was not a incredibly thorough review on the part of planning. Planning seemed to have more questions about what they were exactly proposing than they did answers. They required additional information really to give meaningful feedback to the developer on that.
Let's see, just a small question. So one of the things which they're doing is they're building a 100-car underground garage, right? Which at least I've not seen in any of the residential areas. So that seems to be a little bit out of character. So I wanted to see, is that something normal? Is that something that's happened in San Jose?
You said 100 parking?
100-car underground parking garage.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. It would be reviewed as part of the process. I didn't see any plans yet. I mean, if it's all underground, it would be very, very
I
expensive.
think what he's asking is this the kind of thing in a sea of single-family homes we see elsewhere in San Jose in terms of parking?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, well, so a couple of things on underground parking is it's very, very expensive. It's very uncommon. We don't see it very often. Typically, when it is happen is in downtown, which Shawn can talk about that. But it's so I would be surprised if they have the resources to pay to put in underground parking. But there's, I think generally from a planning and urban design point of view, we like underground parking. We don't want cars visible, as you're walking down the street. It's great. So much of America now is dominated by parking lots and roads, and as much as you can get the parking lots out of sight, out of mind, or at least people know where to park, but it's not this big parking lot sitting out on the street. That's ideal. But in terms of the parking, how much, where, all that would just have to be figured out as part of the entitlement process. We don't have policies that preclude someone to propose underground parking.
Bill, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question regarding the high fees which the city charges to the developer. I read many times about the fees are very high, and if the fees are very high for building things which are then given to the buyer. So question one, who sets the fees for the buildings? And where does the money go after the city collects the fees?
So do you have an hour? It's very common. So I'll let Shawn jump in when I'm done. I'll take a first stab at it. So there's all kinds of fees. There are City of San Jose fees. There are school district fees. Most of the fees come from the city. And there are fees to get for processing your planning entitlements. There's fees for building permits. There can be fees. There are affordable housing fees. There's fees for parks. There's just a whole host of fees. So some of it goes to actually pay the staff to process your permit. San Jose is cost recovery. So if you look at the planning and building department, we do not get money from the city. We're not paid by the city. We're paid by the fees. We're like a consulting firm. Because San Jose doesn't have money to pay us, it's KT Urban that pays our salary. So there's that, and then there's all kinds of fees because development creates the need for things like parks and roads and code enforcement, police, whatever. So then there's fees related to that. We have a need for affordable housing, which the redevelopment agency used to give us between $40 to $50 million a year for affordable housing. Jerry Brown, gone. So now, well, who do we look for housing? We look to our developer partners to provide, to build the affordable housing. So it's very, very complicated. You need really a PhD in costology, municipal costology. And I think it's one of the things the mayor's directed to look at. Can we simplify it? Can we come up with one fee? At least, and then the city sort of figures out how they want to spend it. So it's just a lot clearer, because when someone calls us and asks, you know, how much is the permit fees going to be cost and all that, I mean, it's really hard to answer that. And so there's acknowledging, yeah, it's confusing, and I'm sure you want to. What's that?
Because, you know, whatever fees you charge the developer doesn't eat it.
No, let me answer that. So I would say, so again, you know, Market 101 is that the developers will charge what the market will bear. If
we don't charge it.
What? Well, so you can't always pass this cost on. Here, go ahead.
I'll disagree with Michael on Econ 101. So we don't pay the fee, the home buyer pays the fee at the end of the day, okay? You know, there's some disagreement between private developers and city government about whether or not the land value, you know, takes a portion of that. The problem is that property owners just won't sell their property, right? So going back to the fees, I don't want to get on my soapbox, but there's a lot of things that we need to change in California. One is the Quimby Act. And the Quimby Act basically is a requirement that you have 3 acres park for every resident. And one of the problems, is it 3,000?
It's every 1,000.
Every 3,000, sorry, that's what I meant.
That'd be a lot of park.
One of the problems is so do you guys think that your parks are properly maintained in Evergreen? Okay, right, so.
Because we're on the east side.
I can tell you in Cambrian that our parks aren't very well maintained either, and I don't want to bag on the Parks Department, but one of the problems is that you can't use Quimby Act fees to maintain existing parks. And so that's something that the state needs to look at changing. And it's something that you all need to contact you know, your representatives to talk about. But there's a lot of things that we can change, but fees are driven by the Mitigation Fee Act and the Quimby Act primarily. And you know, we just need to strike a balance. For example, office development, they don't pay park fees in San Jose. In San Francisco, office developers actually pay park fees for daytime use because their employees use parks during the day. And daytime use probably is 60% of your week. But here in San Jose, new home buyers pay for it. In San Jose, office development doesn't pay affordable housing fees. New home buyers do. We're working with the Silicon Valley organization to try and change that, to try and lower the overall fee burden, but broaden the base to include commercial development so that we can still generate, you know, we all know we need affordable housing and we all want to participate in funding that. The question is how does it get shared equitably among the people who create the jobs and the people who need housing?
We have a question over here.
I just wanted to.
Robert, we want to say.
Yeah, I wanted to, Michael mentioned it briefly, one of the things that the mayor has proposed just in February was kind of developing a concept of a universal fee developed so that there's not all kind of these different ones that are hard to understand from a public perspective and from a developer perspective where there's really clarity in terms of where the fees are going and what they are. And then that would allow us to better study and understand if we're charging too much or too less and to have, you know, kind of annual check-ins for the amounts that we're giving. So that's something we're really interested in and working towards. So.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on what Shawn was saying about how commercial development shouldn't be exempt from these fees because that's, you know, the quality of the life in a community where a commercial project is located affects the you know, the value of that development and the profitability of it. You know, there's been studies that have shown that it's good for businesses to have good quality parks in the area. They attract, you know, their employees are more willing to come and work there, not to mention that they use them as well. So I think that's a good suggestion. I'm glad to hear that that's being considered.
My question was regarding conditional use permits, and I was wondering how much weight is given to the neighbors' input as to whether or not the permit is granted?
John, you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I'll answer that. Sure, so I'm a planning commissioner with the city. Personally, I put a lot of weight on the neighbors' input, but it's really important, and I won't give you Planning Commission 101, but I'll give you like a minute on this. The Planning Commission serves in a quasi-legislative and quasi-judicial manner. What that means is we partly are helping to implement the policies the city council has set, but we're also, like Michael said earlier, we're reviewing, sometimes it's hundreds of pages, so I joke that it should be the reading commission, and back me up on this, right, Mr. Zito? We're reading these proposals and then we're weighing it against the staff reporting on the general plan. And also sometimes I go refer to the damn thing myself. I mean, I literally have a printed copy of like 500-page binder of the general plan. So in that quasi-judicial role, we're trying to weigh these things. So just a little cheat sheet for you, what's really helpful is when community members point out policies and goals of the city and previously documented direction that says, you know, thou shalt make sidewalks this wide in a commercial pedestrian, and sometimes there's references in other places, and there is conflicting stuff in the general plan, but a lot of times those other data points aren't picked up in the staff report, they're not in the analysis. So if we get input that says, hey, look at this other thing over here, or look at this precedent over there, or look at this policy that the council proposed, or look at the bird safe guidelines, or whatever, right? Any of those other things will actually influence. So I guess the big thing is if you're just saying there's too much traffic, there's too much parking, doesn't really help, but if you say this policy on page 76 that the staff report ignores, applies here, you know, then that actually has some weight. And as a neighborhood guy, my neighbors and I, when I was living across town, managed to stop another used car lot from being added on West San Carlos Street, where there were already 20-something car lots. And the way we did that was we wrote letters and we pointed out the inconsistencies with the general plan that were completely ignored by the staff report. So if there's a method to doing that, if as a neighbor you really want to provide input and move the needle. That's kind of a long answer.
Let me add a little bit to that, and I agree with everything you said, and underline several parts of that too. Lots of pages to read, a lot of comparing to precedent, right, what was already there. I'm gonna give you a little piece of advice. If it's one thing I learned with the Sikh temple issue that came down, I just bought my new house there and then found out that the temple was gonna be built. And there was a whole lot of other things. And sitting on the planning commission, I find that when the community works with the developer or the person who's proposing the project ahead of time, they can get things into wording of a CUP. And and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, planning loves it when there's agreement.
Oh, yeah.
And if they come to...
Nobody shows up, we've had success.
Right. I mean, if you can get these things ironed out ahead of time, like, hey, can you limit the use to like not after 11 p.m. or can you make sure that there's no amplified music after, you know, whatever. And if you can get those ahead of time in agreement in a letter that they can put into a CUP, you've done a huge amount in saving time and anger and all kinds of other things. So working community with the developer is huge, and that's why I always recommend to any developers, go out and see your community, work with your community, make friends with your community, have them stand beside you as instead of against you.
So sorry, we all have something to say. I wanted to add on to that. I think that's great advice, both, you know, from John saying look for specific issues that, you know, may be a problem, and also work with developers when possible. that is not always profitable, I would say. I mean, this is what I do for the most part is, advocate on land use issues. So I would say, your council office is a great resource, talk to Councilmember Arrhenius and her staff and, find out what's going on and, and see if they're able to help you. But I would also say that don't think that you're gonna win by like showing up on the night of the planning commission meeting and, saying, I've got a problem with this, you need to stop it. Because people need time to review the project, they need time to understand your concerns. You may wanna take them around your neighborhood and say, and just have them visit it in person and see what's going on or what your concerns are. So you need to put in some time and you need to understand sort of, everybody's perspective, the developer's perspective, the planning staff's perspective and so on, not just your own perspective. So that's how you can succeed in something like that.
I want to thank the panelists for coming out tonight. We need to move on to the rest of our program. There's going to be some time for elected officials and members to make comments.
Point at not an elected official. There is considerable discourse or argumentation about the most recent planning commission appointment and the lack of geographical diversity on the planning commission. The 7 planning commissioners serve at large for the city, so we're not from one district. At the time, you had like four of us who were from D6, and I have lived in D6, but now I'm over technically in D3. But the reason I'm telling you this is Planning Commissioner Namrata Vora recently resigned. She's from District 1. And so now there's another vacancy that is coming up. So if any of you have a hankering for land use and planning and zoning and your blood started to run while Michael was going through the map in the city, keep an eye out. The city has a portal for applying for this and keep an eye on your council members' newsletter. Hopefully you guys will include something about, they always say board and commission vacancies, the airport commission, whatever. Planning commission will be in there, so.
Thanks. All right, welcome. They mentioned you're not here to see it.
I'm Maria Fuetues, and I'm a trustee with the San Jose Evergreen Community College Board. And there's a couple of things I wanted to mention. One is that, the question was asked about what's happening with the developer, Republic. And right now, the district is in the process of renegotiating the contract. Because, initially the contract was only for 1 year, and they've actually received 2 extensions, one for 1 month and then another for 2 or 3 months. So we're in the process of renegotiating it, and I looked at the agenda. I'm not sure it's going to be on our next agenda. We only meet once a month, and it's always the second Tuesday of the month, and it's usually at our district office, which is on 70 South Market Street. And what I wanted to let you know is we'll be having this meeting on this coming Tuesday. The meeting starts at 5, and that's when we have public input for our closed session agenda. If we negotiate the contract on Tuesday, we will be then, needing your input and feedback about what we're doing prior to when we go to closed session. It isn't right now on the open session agenda, which I only have a draft of the agenda, but it might be. And the reason I wanted to mention this is it's really important. I know the community has a lot of concerns about what's going on. And I think now that it's being negotiated, I think now's the time to go. I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to say this when there were more people here. The other thing is that the community has been saying a lot about the lack of offerings and programs at Evergreen and San Jose City. A lot more than was heard in the past. And I want you to know that this year Evergreen College had the highest graduation in history, in its 35-year history. So it really means that more people are going to Evergreen and more people are needing Evergreen. And also, of course, City is also another resource for our community. And when we think of what Republicans right now proposing of only using the 13 acres, that leaves, about 14 acres that we could be using for education. And I feel there's a lot of energy, including on the part of our city council member, Sylvia Dennis, to meet the educational needs of our community. And I hope that people will speak up and give input, because right now the need is there, the land is there, and if we were to use that to expand Evergreen College, then all of you would need to be part of that process. So I just really want to emphasize to bring that up, and I hope we can have at a future meeting, either the chancellor or again, the president of Evergreen College to talk about this so that we can start thinking, because if we're gonna use, I've been thinking myself personally that I don't want a 90-year lease with this developer, because in the future, and that's what's being proposed, that's what's been talked about all these, these couple of years, because in the future we need that land. But the reality is that if we're gonna use that land for education, we have to start planning and start doing it now. Because now is when our community needs that land for educational purpose. And I just wanted to also mention that I am going to follow up with Assemblymember Cashla, just to find out a little bit more about the state audit and what is the process and why it wasn't conducted. Because one thing that I'm thinking about is that if there is interest in the community for really opening up the use of that land and seeing whether or not our district is using it correctly based on what the voters voted for. If the community really wants it, we should be transparent. We should air out the question, get the facts, get the information. If it's a state audit that needs to be conducted, go through the process so that we can all know, and that can be kind of off the table one way or another, because I have a concern as a board member, and I think other board members might agree, that if the community feels that we're misusing the land and there's valid reason why the community is believing that or thinking that, then we should look into it. We should find out the facts and make sure that we're perfectly 100% sure. So anyway, these are all points that I wanted to share with you, and also I hope that we can have more discussion in the future. And this was a great meeting. I don't see Bob anywhere.